Okay people, at some point in the last week, you made a decision by talking to yourself. Not out loud, in your head. A conversation between you and the only colleague who's always available, the voice that lives in there. And here's the thing about that colleague, they're not always right, they're not always rational. And unlike everyone else you work with, you can't challenge them, you can't fire them, and they never have to justify themselves to anyone. That's not a productivity problem, that's a loneliness problem. And it's one of the most underestimated risks in how you lead. Research from the Harvard Business Review found that loneliness among senior leaders isn't a side effect of success. It's a structural feature of it. You see, the higher you climb, the smaller the number of people who are willing to tell you the hard things. Now, that's not because they don't care, but because the stakes of being wrong in front of you get higher the more the authority you carry. So the feedback loop shrinks, the sounding board disappears, and what fills the gap is the voice that has access to every fear you've ever had, every worst case scenario you've ever run, and no obligation to be fair about any of it. Now, the behaviour doesn't look like loneliness from the outside. From the outside, it looks like decisiveness, self-sufficiency, confidence. You make the call, you move forward. You don't need a committee. But on the inside, the process is different. You're running scenarios nobody else has seen. You're stress testing decisions against a version of reality that exists only in your thinking. You're having arguments with people who aren't even in the room, and you're winning them because you control both sides. And the version of events you're working from gets less and less tested against the world outside the longer this goes on. Not because you're wrong, because you've stopped checking. Now, there's a specific internal monologue that goes on at this stage. Nobody else understands the full picture. If I show uncertainty, I'll lose the room. I'll figure it out. I always do. Every one of those sentences is a reason not to let anyone in. Every one of them might be partially true. That's what makes them so effective at keeping the door closed. The loneliness doesn't announce itself, it justifies itself. It arrives dressed up as strength. Here's the moment of truth. You're in the middle of a decision, a real one, something that matters, something with real consequence. And the person you talk it through with is you. Not because there's no one available, but because somewhere along the way, you stopped believing there was anyone who could actually hold the weight of it. Anyone who understood enough. Anyone who had enough skin in the game. Anyone who could be trusted not to let it change how they saw you. So it's just you and the voice. And the voice is doing its best, but its best is limited. Everything you already know, everything you already fear, and everything you've already decided without realizing you've decided it. That's the moment. Not dramatic, not a crisis, just a Tuesday afternoon, and the only colleague in the room is the one who's never been wrong in front of you because it's never had to be. This is one of the most consistent things I hear from founders and senior leaders. Not, I'm lonely. They rarely say that, but I don't have anyone I can really talk to about this. There's no one who gets it. I can't show uncertainty at this level. The language changes, the experience is the same, and it's not a personal failing. It's what happens when you build something, a business, a career, a reputation that puts distance between you and the kind of honest conversation that used to come naturally. The more successful you become, the more you need it, the harder it gets to find. The cost isn't the bad decision made in isolation. You can recover from a bad decision. The cost is what happens to your judgment when every decision lives only in your head. The fears that never get named out loud and so never get smaller. The version of the problem that grows unchallenged until it's bigger than actually the problem ever was. The scenarios that run on a loop in your head at 3 a.m. that would take 10 minutes to dissolve in the right conversation, but there's no conversation, so they don't dissolve. That's what isolation does to judgment. Not dramatically, quietly, one unshared decision at a time. The voice in your head isn't going anywhere, but it was never supposed to be the only voice. The leaders who sustain this, who build things over time without burnout or breaking down, they're not the ones who needed less support. They're the ones who stopped pretending they didn't need any. Not because they were weaker, because they were honest about thinking alone in the dark and what it actually costs. And they decided it wasn't worth the price. If you recognize yourself somewhere in that, this channel is for you. So subscribe, because this is exactly what we talk about here. See you next time.